So thank you all for coming today. It's great to be a part of, my Michigan flute community in some virtual format. Um, so yeah, as Laura said, today's about intentional fluting, which I feel like I've been thinking about this concept um, for a couple of years now, but I think it's become even more important during the pandemic and the shift in how we relate to our flute playing and how we spend our time, our individual time with the flute. Um, so, just a little outline for today's intentions. Um, Talk about where this question kind of came from and the origins of this workshop, what practice and playing means. We'll have a couple reflective activities um, for you to kind of think about what those terms mean to you. We'll talk about benefits, pitfalls, how to balance those two things, and how that balance might shift throughout your life depending on your goals. Um, and then if you are a teacher, we'll talk about a little bit about how to have that conversation with students and to start it. If you have any questions, just generally throughout, please put them in the chat, and hopefully at the end, Laura will share those with me and I can address some of those questions at the end. All right, let's get started. So this is where intentional fluting began. I kept getting asked, how often do you practice? How often do you practice? How often do you practice? Just raise of hand. Has anyone been asked that question before? Yeah, I think that's a question that sometimes we'll get. Um, and then do you practice every day? And I kept thinking about, well, sometimes I practice and sometimes I just, I don't know, like to run through music for fun. But it doesn't feel like practice. It's more like playing. And so that's when I started to think about, well, what's the difference between practicing and playing? And so I observed myself and my own behaviors around that. And I also was looking at my students at the time who were ages 9 through 18 and kind of how did they view practice versus playing. Um, so I am a teacher, I'm a performer, and I'm also a researcher. So this whole like concept of what's going on definitely piqued my interest. And so I figured that there were two kind of intentions of what solo flute sessions could be. So the first one is practicing. There's 13-year-old me within my first year of playing the flute. I was a diligent practicer. I loved to practice at that point. And um, I feel like flute sessions were intended on developing technical skill sets, musical ideas, basically anything to help me improve at actually playing the instrument or music itself. Now, on the other hand, playing was all about just spending time with the instrument itself. It's not about a goal of improving anything. I just want to play the flute because it's fun, because I'm feeling something and I need to express that, whatever it may be. This is a little bass flute that I made out of PVC pipe in a Home Depot for a different concert. It did actually make a sound, just fun fact. Um, so those are kind of my general concepts of what is practicing versus playing. And so I want to start now with you reflecting on what does practice and playing mean for you? So we're going to take 5 minutes and you can type it out, you can write it out. Just what do those two words mean? And there are a few things you might consider, like what do you do when you practice? What do you do when you play? What kind of mindset do you have in both of those sessions? And are there specific things you need to bring to those things? So take a few minutes and just jot down some ideas. You will not be required to share these with anyone. So, really flesh them out.
We need Jeopardy music in the background.
Yeah, I wish I could like pull up a recording really fast and start playing that. Is that Nick doing that? Thank you, Nick. Oh, that's great.
So James, there's a couple answers in the chat. Did you want me to go ahead and read those?
Great. Let's give everyone another 30 seconds. And then if you want to think of one thing about practicing that you want to share with people in the chat, put that in there. And if you have something about playing that you want to put in the chat, share that as well. Just to see like what things are similar, what things are different. There's no right or wrong about this. It's really all about how you view it. And then, yeah, Laura, if you want to share some of those, that'd be great.
Yeah, so people can continue to type in, but I'll just read some of these out for everyone to hear. So Lois said to me, practice is something that has a purpose or end game, learning a skill, improving on something, or learning a piece of music. Playing is more free form creative expression. And Amy Porter wrote, I bring the mindset of the journey and go slowly. Abby Midow, who we will be hearing in the masterclass later, says, with practicing, I might be more disciplined and work on things that aren't as fun, especially in my warm up. With playing, I don't aim for perfection and might play things I'm not currently working on with my teacher. I just have fun. Oh, and we're getting some more in. Here we go. Jeffrey Beyer says, practice to me means focus on details and getting things right or accurate versus playing, meaning expressing or communicating.
Cool. I love these. Thank you all for sharing. So there seems to be some similar trends in the concept, but it might even have a little bit of nuanced differences. So here is, as you're continuing to jot down your ideas, here are some of my characteristics for practicing or playing. Practicing for me requires some motivation, whether it's coming internally or externally, hopefully mostly internal. And then for me, what's really important is to have a problem-solving mindset. So it's just I'm approaching things and how do I go about kind of interacting with what I'm playing or working on. Playing is a lot about giving myself permission to just be free. And I think some other people also mentioned this idea of expression, or there's, or some of the other things, there's less pressure to do something, or I'm not looking for perfection. So, but I think for both, one thing that I found important for me was having gratitude for both practice and playing. Practicing challenges me to grow, and playing just keeps music fresh for me and my relationship with the flute fresh. So benefits and pitfalls, though, when you over practice or when you are over playing, and what can happen. So intentional practicing, we're going to advance our skills. We're going to become more thoughtful about our musical decisions, and hopefully it will lead to more confidence in your own skills and abilities as you're playing harder repertoire. However, if we practice too much, I don't know, has anyone experienced over practicing and then you burn out and you're just like, I don't want to play this flute anymore. I have zero interest in that. Or it can lead to perfectionism and we're overly critical all of the time. Sometimes we can lose sight of the bigger picture if we're over practicing, which is where I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, why am I playing the flute now if all I'm doing is just criticizing and judging all the time. So I think there's a balance in how much practice we do. On the flip side, for playing, if you're really intentionally playing, like we've talked about, you can maintain or improve your connection with the music. But if you're overplaying without any practice, there's some other pitfalls that can happen, which is we'll sound the same all the time. We're not really growing and challenging ourselves. So our skill level is not changing, which can limit sometimes the music that we play. Bad habits can start to form. I love this Lunchables picture. It got sent to me by a friend a few years ago, and she's having a great time, clearly. Um, but there's some interesting hand and embouchure things going on as well. Like, I don't think we really need juice coming out of our flute. So, just things to be aware of, as if you're playing too much, make sure juice isn't coming out of your flute. So I'm just curious, if you want to enter in the chat, what are some things that happen to you if you overplay or if you're over practicing? And then do you have any other benefits that you find from playing or practicing? So take a minute to just reflect on those things. Seems like we have a few things in the chat coming through. Getting a little...
Yeah, so far we have from Brandon LePage. Overplaying for me always equals a bad day the next day because I wasn't purposeful with how I treated my body and embouchure. And Brittany Bissa says, if I practice too long with no break, my jaw gets pretty sore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so some performance injuries.
Yeah, I've also experienced the performance injuries some years ago.
And Nick Bonani says, over practicing or playing results in mental frustrations because I was not directive in my approach. Things can go downhill quickly. And Gail Green says, overdo, adds stress, inhibits breaths, swallowing, dry mouth, yikes.
Oh, yeah, so this is really interesting. What I'm noticing is there's a lot of physical and mental effects that actually come from this. It's not just like, oh, well, I spent a lot of time practicing and I wish I would have played more. Like, there's actual mental things or physical implications of what's going on. So keep those in mind. I hope you'll keep those in mind as you become aware of, am I over practicing or overplaying, and little warning symbols. I think this, let's see. So as we're moving forward, finding the balance, let's see. I got mountain metaphors from a dear friend of mine who's a cellist, and she loves to go hiking, and she always talks in metaphors to her students. And so I've really started seeing hiking in a similar way. And definitely, I think finding a balance is kind of like hiking a mountain. You know, sometimes it's not fun. You're exhausted. You're slipping on wet rocks or whatever it is. And that can sometimes feel like practice. And as someone mentioned earlier in the chat, like, practice is not always fun. It's not always something you want to do, but it's part of this this devotion that you have to the instrument. Whereas playing can seem really glamorous, and it is beautiful to just stop and finally be able to see at the top, wow, look how far I've come. Um, and I think these concepts seem really simple, but it's not something that we always talk about in the music world. It's not something that we acknowledge that there's a value to both. Um, we may say, oh, it's important to play, but are we really valuing playing? Or are we still saying, well, I'm actually going to go practice 95% of the time? Or I'm always going to be thinking about like this analytical side, even while I'm playing. Um, or if you're practicing, are you able to eventually, are you able to work on things and then later on say, now I'm going to play and have a great time enjoying some music? I think it's actually more of a struggle to balance these than we give it credit for. So today, our last kind of main activity is talking about how do we balance it. And there are 4 steps that I like to go through when figuring out what are my intentions with my flute sessions. So we're going to go through these kind of in a brief form, and of course, take these with you and feel free to flesh them out more. But start with take a minute or two and just what is your current relationship with the flute? Do you feel like you are playing some these days, and are you practicing some, and how much are you doing of each? So take just a minute and write about um, your current balance with the instrument. And then once you've done that, um, kind of step away from your current balance and reflect on what are your current goals as a flutist. What are your practice goals? Maybe you have a column separate for your practice goals versus your playing goals. Sometimes with my goals, I also like to write why that's a goal for me and where is that goal coming from? Is it something that I want to do, or is it an external? Is there an external motivation as well? So now you can keep working on your goals or make a little last note, but take a moment now to just compare what is your current balance from step one and what are your goals moving forward and how do they relate? Are you kind of working towards those things or is there a shift that needs to happen in order for you to meet those goals? And then that kind of leads into step four, which is developing a plan and a mindset to move forward to meet your flute intentions. And there's a couple questions there um, to guide you if you feel like there is a shift. So take one more minute to wrap up all your thoughts around this. So while you're finishing that up, one thing I want to mention is um, the mindset of having some self-compassion as you're setting these intentions and maybe noticing that, oh, I'm not quite meeting the goals that I want, or I'm a little overbalanced in one way or the other. Um, as life changes and as your career changes or your lessons change, whatever, um, it's okay that these goals change. And I just feel like it's important to say that because I've met a number of flutists who feel like they have to keep the same goal all the way through life, and it's really hard to make any shift. Um, and so, this is a way to just help you stay on track with where you want to go as a flutist. Um, yeah. And so oftentimes, depending on the what's kind of going on in life, I will set a regular time to say, okay, now I'm going to sit down and check in with my intentions and how am I practicing and playing and how does that relate to my current goals? And that leads me to the last portion, which is if you're a teacher, how to have a conversation with a student about this. Um, I have had these conversations with my beginner students as young as 9 years old, up to adults who have retired and are playing the flute for fun and everything in between. And I feel like this conversation can be really beneficial for both the student and the teacher. But there are a couple key things to keep it on a healthy track. And it's one is making sure you're coming in with a lot of curiosity as a teacher and openness to whatever the student shares with you and creating a safe environment where they're not going to feel the external pressure coming from you as the teacher, where they have to say, oh, this is what they want me to say is my goal. But rather saying, what are your goals as a flute? I'd love to know more about you and why you like playing the flute or what interests it about you. Um, and through that openness, um, I've learned really fascinating things about my students and how sometimes their career trajectory does change a little bit. And then I can better guide them and actually become a better teacher for them. Or they'll notice, wow, like some will say, wow, I used to just want to play for fun. And now I'm seeing this is actually what I want to do with my life. I'm realizing that I want to be more intentional with it and I want to practice more. Um, and so then I can better guide them as the teacher and saying, okay, so what does that career look? What are you envisioning as your career? And here are the steps to get there now. Are you wanting to go along those steps? Because then you as the teacher can provide a clearer guidance as to this is what it's going to take to reach those goals. Is that something you still want to go for? And then you can be a guide along their path. So the topics to inquire below are just kind of the order that I like to approach it. Start by just getting the student to talk about their views, how much they do of it every week, and not placing any judgment on what they say, but just creating a space to have a conversation. And then by the end of it, hopefully they will have some ideas as to how they would like to improve or make changes to their balance. Yeah, so that's our short little workshop on intentional fluting. Um, at this point, I know we're a minute over. We started a couple minutes late, so Laura, I hope it's okay if anyone has a question, please feel free to put in the chat or yeah. Otherwise, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it, and I hope this gives you just some inspiration as you continue to be more intentional with your flute playing.